I'll sit unless the chairs don't collapse on me. Chairs are dangerous around here. Already had the one fiasco. I know. He gets 2 of you guys? It's very impressive.
Barbara coming?
Yeah.
I don't
We
know.
don't need. Let me go double.
I mean, I don't want to make her mad.
Not me.
Don't want to make her mad. Sure you will. Sure. It's true. Like the rest of you, I could make you all mad with Bob, but I don't want to make you mad. No, I mean, it's like, you'll let me know. And then the rest of them all keep it quiet.
A lot of people read across the world.
It's true, they do. That's absolutely right. All right. On behalf of the House Democratic Caucus, I want to thank you all for being here for the end of week 2 of the 2017 legislative session. I've got a few comments that I want to begin with, and I'll be happy to answer any questions from the press corps as you all see fit. I want to start off with this. As week 2 of the legislative session is coming to a close, some things are becoming very apparent, and that is we have a leadership crisis in the state of Oklahoma. Not just a fiscal or financial crisis facing a $900 million budget hole, but we have a leadership crisis in the state of Oklahoma. For the last 6 or 7 years, the Republican Party, Governor Mary Fowler, Lieutenant Governor Todd Lamb, and the Republican majorities, the super majorities in the House and the Senate, have controlled this state and have helped pass legislation after legislation that has created this financial disaster that faces our public schools, our hospitals, our prison system, our DHS system, our mental health system. This year, the governor decided to propose a series of revenue-raising measures to hopefully pull us out of the ditch that she and Lieutenant Governor Lamb and the Speaker and the Pro Tem have helped drive the state off into. But instead of looking back at the gross production tax cuts, the income tax cuts, the failure to expand Medicaid, the billions of dollars in tax credits and exemptions, the governor instead decided to raise taxes on haircuts and doctor's visits and dental visits and oil change services, raise taxes on the backs of middle-class families. Well, if that wasn't bad enough, the fact that the very day that she rolled those plans out 2 weeks ago, the President Pro Tem of the Senate was asked what parts of her tax plan he and his caucus would support, and he offered, at this point, there are none, but we'll have to take a look at them at some future date. And then today, we learned that the Lieutenant Governor, Todd Lamb, has decided to completely abandon the governor's plan to balance the budget, has left her cabinet, and abandoned the plans to work together to try to solve the crisis that he and she and the rest of the Republican majority helped create. Clearly, when the governor can't have the Lieutenant Governor, the Pro Tem of the Senate, or the Speaker of the House all on the same page when it comes to helping education, healthcare, and public safety, the state of Oklahoma not only faces a fiscal or financial crisis, but we face a dire leadership crisis. So the question that we have is, we know what the governor's plan is, raising taxes on middle-class families, and we oppose it. We know what the House Republicans' plan is. That's simply to raise cigarette taxes and hope that more money rolls in from some sort of miraculous source. Today, I guess the question needs to be posed to Lieutenant Governor Lamb. If he's going to abandon the governor and he's not going to stand with the Speaker of the House or the Pro Tem, what's his plan? We've laid out our plan. That is to index the gross production tax to the price of oil, roll back the fiscally irresponsible income tax cuts. Let's bring our federal $900 million worth of federal money home to take care of the 1 in 5 citizens that don't have any health insurance. And let's find a way to eliminate some of these wasteful tax credits and exemptions. We've laid out our plan. Our plan is directly related to what put us in this mess, right? Their decisions. But now the question is what's Lieutenant Governor Lamb's plan? If he doesn't want to raise taxes on middle-class families like the governor, then it's time for him to step up and show leadership and demonstrate to all of us what he really wants to do. With that being said, with that being said, I do want to address the cigarette tax issue. That's moving its way through appropriations this week, and maybe scheduled for a vote on the House floor sometime in the next couple of weeks. I will reiterate that my caucus is not philosophically opposed to the concept of a $1.50 increase in the cigarette tax, $1.50 per pack increase in the cigarette tax. However, we've told it to the governor, we've told it to every leader involved in this budgetary process. The state of Oklahoma, our education system, our healthcare system, our correctional system is in crisis, and it's not in crisis because cigarettes are too cheap. The state of Oklahoma and our education, our kids, our healthcare system are in crisis because this governor and this Republican majority slashed revenues year after year with income tax cuts, gross production tax cuts, and tax credits and exemptions. A cigarette tax is not the sole solution to what faces Oklahoma. My caucus is willing to work with the governor, willing to work with the speaker, and willing to work with the pro tem of the Senate to find a solution to help balance this $900 million budget hole. However, a cigarette tax alone won't get it done. And so if that's their only solution is to raise taxes on folks who smoke cigarettes, then they're not going to find uniform support from my caucus to get that done. And I believe they're going to need every single one of our votes to pass that vote, to get to 76 votes. And so we're again reiterating our call to the governor and the leadership in both the House and the Senate to work with us. We want to work in a bipartisan manner to not just find a way to support the cigarette tax, but also find a way to restore the gross production tax cuts or the income tax cuts, something that'll bring real revenue to the state to help close this $900 million hole and protect children, protect those who desperately need health care, and to protect those who desperately need a strong public safety system in Oklahoma. If they run out of cigarette tax all by itself, I don't believe the Republicans have the numbers that they need to pass it, and we'll be back to where we were last year with the partisan games being played by the majority with the refusal to actually work across the aisle. My caucus is extending our hand to the Republican majority, saying we want to work with them. We've offered up our plans. We're not hiding the ball. We've told everybody in the media. We've told all of them what it is that we want, what we want to do, and why we want to do it. It's not a special project. It's because we know those cuts are what put us in this mess, and we want to restore those cuts as a way to restore funding for core services. And if the Republican majority and the governor are willing to work with us, and we will help them on the cigarette tax, and they desperately need our support in order to get that done. The last two things that I will address, one is good, one is not so good. Today on the House floor, the House of Representatives passed in a bipartisan manner a fix to the Real ID legislation, which has been an embarrassment for this state for the last number of years, jeopardizing people that live in my district in Del City and South Oklahoma City and their ability to access Tinker Air Force Base, their ability to access an airplane to be able to go see their family and friends or to travel. The House Democrats have called for a fix for the last number of years, and it wasn't until this morning on the House floor that the Republican majority, with our help, got that bill across the finish line, and we now send it over to the Senate, and we hope that our colleagues in the Senate will take that up. But the one downside, the one negative thing that I'll talk about that happened this week deals with what has been affectionately referred to as the host bill. You know, our caucus, we've got some members of our caucus who consider themselves pro-life, some consider themselves pro-choice, and some consider themselves somewhere in between. But at the end of the day, we are tired of this legislature passing unconstitutional legislation to make a political point that will only end up costing us hundreds of thousands or potentially millions of dollars to defend in court, all to an unsuccessful end. And that legislation by Representative Humphrey from Southeast Oklahoma, we believe will do just that. Not only will it cost the state lots of money to defend in an unconstitutional bill, but it also gives us another black eye on the national stage. And we're hoping that the Speaker of the House will do the right thing. And even though that bill is now passed out of committee, that the Speaker of the House will bottle that up and not bring that to a vote on the floor. The people of Oklahoma deserve better. The taxpayers deserve better. And we're hoping that the Speaker will heed our call and do the right thing. With that, I'll open up to any questions.
Leader Inman, you are considering running for governor. Lieutenant Governor Lamb is considering running for governor. Are you trying to hang the Fallon tax plan around his neck?
The Fallon tax plan, I guess what Lieutenant Governor Lamb is trying to do is trying to separate himself from Governor Fallon. It's up to him as to what tax plan he wants to offer. For a while, it looked like he would be supportive of the plan because you didn't hear anything from him. It was sort of silence of the lambs, as it were, when it came to the governor rolling out 164 brand new tax increases. He was absolutely silent for 2 weeks, and then apparently when the pressure ramped up on him and people started asking questions, he decided to come out and throw the governor under the bus. And I don't fault him for that because I don't support her tax plan either. But I don't sit on her cabinet. I haven't worked to try to lead this state with her as a lieutenant governor for the last 6 or 7 years like he has. And so the question now that has to be posed to Lieutenant Governor Lamb is, what are your solutions? How would you raise the important revenue necessary to protect health care and to find a way to fund teacher pay? Because just simply saying you're against something doesn't solve the problem. My caucus is against her plans, but we have offered up our plans to fund education, health care, public safety, and transportation. The Lieutenant Governor has yet to provide that, and we're asking for his leadership in that way.
I'm going to do like you guys do on the floor and ask, Wouldn't you agree that resignation from her cabinet sends a pretty clear signal that he doesn't support her tax increase?
By Lieutenant Governor Lamb stepping down from Governor Fallon's cabinet sends one message. There's a complete lack of leadership in this building. There's a complete lack of leadership in the state of Oklahoma. When the Republican governor and the Republican lieutenant governor, the Republican president pro tem of the Senate, and the Republican speaker of the House cannot come together on a single revenue-raising measure in order to balance the $900 million budget hole, when we've known we've had a budget crisis for the last 6 years, it's just indicative of the fact that the folks in charge don't know what they're doing well enough to be able to properly fund education, healthcare, and public safety. We've got a leadership crisis. And the fact that the lieutenant governor has decided to throw the governor under the bus when it comes to her tax plan is just another example of that.
But Leader Inman, since when is the lieutenant governor ever involved in matters like this?
The lieutenant governor sits on the governor's cabinet, and I know when Governor Askins was lieutenant governor, she worked closely with Governor Brad Henry as a member of the Board of Equalization. She worked closely with him to try to help advance legislation to improve the state of Oklahoma. I remember when my first few years at the Capitol, when Jerry Askins was lieutenant governor and Brad Henry was governor, she would come to our caucus, to the Democratic caucus, and advocate for legislation that the governor felt was important. They worked hand in hand to improve the state of Oklahoma. They were on the same page for the vast majority of the issues. And in this instance, I think it's incumbent upon the lieutenant governor to not just cut ribbons, but to actually step up and do something to help advance the cause for public education and healthcare in the state of Oklahoma. And by simply throwing the governor under the bus to give himself political deniability when it comes to ownership of a really bad tax plan, that's not leadership. Leadership is stepping up like we have done and offering up a plan to properly fund education, healthcare, and public safety.
Well, wouldn't you agree Gary Jones is a separate constitutional officer, just like the lieutenant governor, and he's not supportive of the governor's tax increase?
He is separate in that part, absolutely. You're right. But he's got a job as state auditor that is separate and apart from that of lieutenant governor. Part of the lieutenant governor's job is to work as part of the executive branch with the governor to find a way to balance the budget, to find a way to take care of education, healthcare, and public safety. And for the last number of years, he's been silent as we've seen cut after cut after cut handed down to those areas where the people of Oklahoma really care about. And today, the first thing we've heard from him as it pertains to fiscal policy or tax policy in the last 6 years is simply to throw the governor under the bus and not offer up a plan to properly fund education. And I find that to be politically advantageous, but not necessarily politically courageous.
Do you get the sense that Republicans, that there's any willingness, Door Cleaner indicated last week that perhaps there's some willingness to work with you on your idea of indexing the gross production tax? Do you get the sense that that may be something that could?
Absolutely. So for those who are watching this at home, or for those who may see this on the news or see it on social media, I want you all to understand that while the legislature may appear stuck sort of in an immovable position, there is an opportunity when it comes to indexing the gross production tax to the price of oil, or just ticking it up a couple of notches, say going from a 2% gross production tax for the first 3 years to maybe 4%. The governor is open to the idea. Leslie Osborne, the chairwoman of Appropriations in the House, is open to it. The former chairman of Appropriations, Earl Sears, is open to it. And of course, my caucus is as well. We would rather see it indexed, but if they come to us and say, look, we're going to go from 2% to 4%, that would bring in several $100 million. At the same time that we would then work with them on the cigarette tax, that would bring in another $150 to $180 million. And now you're talking about serious revenue to help backfill a $900 million hole. And so if they're willing to do that, we're willing to work with them. And I think that there is an opportunity to make that happen. And so for the voters, the citizens of Oklahoma who may be watching this now, they need to be contacting their Republican legislators and the Republican governor and asking them to work on restoring the gross production tax cuts that help to create this financial problem. The price of oil is going back up. The oil and gas companies can certainly do it. Tom Ward, who from Sandridge, and George Kaiser from Kaiser Francis Oil, back several years ago, admitted openly to all of us in the legislature that the gross production tax going from 7% to 2% was not a major factor in whether or not they drill oil in Oklahoma. And they told us, please use those dollars to fund education because that's more important. And this legislature instead caved to some other special interest groups within the oil and gas community and kept it at 2%. There's a real opportunity to see us move that needle upwards a couple of points to bring in significant revenue to the people of Oklahoma for their kids, for health care, and to do it by not putting it on the backs of working families like her taxes on 164 different services for middle-class families would do.
Any current plans, DOA? Fallon's sales tax?
I can't see any way in which a number or the vast majority or anywhere near the 164 taxes on services ever sees the light of day in this legislature.
Governor's also proposed a gross production tax on wind. Does your caucus have a position on that?
So our official position is that we need to treat energy sources evenly, right? We don't want to turn around and say, well, let's just tax wind and leave oil and gas alone, or let's just let's leave wind alone at the same time we tax oil and gas. We think that it all needs to be treated equally, and in that sense, if she wants to do something like that, we're open to it, but not as some way to offset her cuts in gross production taxes to the oil and gas industry. If she looks at raising the gross production tax on oil and gas like she should, like many believe that she should, I think she's even open to that. She is open to the concept. If she's willing to do that, then we'll have a broader discussion with her on taxes as it pertains to other energy sources.
Pro Tem Schultz was saying that everything's got to be on the table when it comes to funding teacher pay raises. And then Senator Sharp yesterday pretty much deferred to the House, said, all right, pretty much you guys figure out how we're going to fund this. Your reaction, your stance on this.
Yeah, I hope all the teachers who may have read the newspaper yesterday that a series of teacher pay raise bills or potential pay raise bills got out of a Senate subcommittee. I hope they're all paying attention and understanding what's going on. There is no plan by the Republican majority to truly fund a legitimate teacher pay raise to $1,000 or to $10,000. And what you see now is simply a political game trying to win the media cycle or the news cycle for that day or that week to try to make it look as if they truly do care about teacher pay. Until they offer up a legitimate funding source for those teacher pay raises, they're not going to happen. And for the last number of years, my caucus has sat by and watched Republican member after Republican member offer up a teacher pay plan and never offered up a true source to fund it. What passed out of the Senate yesterday through committee has no real funding mechanism to it. And what you heard from Senator Sharp was, well, if we're ever going to fund it, the House must come up with it. And we are offering up solutions. My caucus has offered up solutions that will bring in hundreds of millions of dollars to help fund a teacher pay raise. Unfortunately, when the pro tem says that all things should be on the table, when we say, how about the income tax cuts that help create this problem? He says no. How about the gross production tax that help create this problem? He says, I'm not sure I want to do that. How about bringing in $900 million worth of our federal money from Washington to take care of our uninsured? They don't want to do that. How about legitimately going after some of the other tax credits that have put us in this mess? Well, no, they're going to pick winners and losers there. And so when they say everything's on the table, for us, legitimately everything is on the table because kids, senior citizens just depend upon it. Their lives depend upon it. Their futures depend upon it. And we're tired of the games that are being played by the folks on the other side.
One last nail on the sales tax ideas. Have you heard, you're known for being able to have very good conversations all across the spectrum, you know, regardless of your toughness in the press conferences. So my question is, have you heard a single member of the House or Senate express support for this unprecedented 164 categories sales tax increase?
And Pat, that's a great question. I've not heard one member of the House of Representatives or the Senate say that they support the governor's 164 plan 164-step tax increase on working families. I've not heard one. I have heard that some members of the Republican majority are looking at a small number of those services, anywhere between 2 to 10 potentially, right? That they're looking at singling out and trying to raise taxes on a particular set of services, but not sort of writ large, the 164, that's not going to happen. But the voters of Oklahoma ought to be concerned that income tax cuts for the wealthy aren't on the table, that gross production tax cuts for well-to-do corporations should be on the table. I'm trying to put them on the table, but right now they're not. But the Republican majority is looking at raising some taxes on some of the services that our folks enjoy and use to live their daily lives. And that is just a continued shift, just like with the cigarette tax, if that's where they want to go. If that's all they do, if they just do the cigarette tax and some taxes on a few services, what will have happened is we will have cut billions of dollars in taxes for well-to-do corporations and wealthy folks who make millions of dollars in the state of Oklahoma, cut taxes for them and turn around and raise taxes on the backs of middle-class families through services and cigarette taxes. And that's unconscionable and immoral. That's not how you fund state government. It's not how you fund a teacher pay raise. It's not how you fund health care. It may be part of an overall plan. Our caucus believes in a low and broad tax structure. We're okay with discussing a cigarette tax. We're okay with discussing specific services taxes, but it can't be an exclusion to income tax, gross production tax, or other tax credits discussions. Any other questions?
Nice guy.
Thanks, Pat. Thank you all for being here. You have a great day. Yes, ma'am. It's great to see you. Are you fine?